Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today's session. My name is Reese, and I'll be your moderator today. We're going to kick off today's session in a couple of minutes. We're just waiting so everyone has a chance to join. In the meanwhile, though, we'd love to hear from you. So let us know where you're joining from using the chat or the comments, depending on what platform you're joining on. And tell us something that you'd like to get out of today's webinar. If there's anything that you're particularly excited about, given the releases last week that we'll get into later on in the session, then let us know. And if you have any questions about anything specific that we run through in the session, let us know in the chat and the comments as well. A little bit of housekeeping before we get going. The session is being recorded and the recording will be emailed to everyone that is registered for the event in the next few days. You can register for the event today by going to datacamp.com/webinars, or I'll be posting a link in the chat very shortly. As mentioned, we're going to have a Q&A towards the end. If you have any questions at any point, then please let us know in the chat and the comments, and I'll be saving them for the Q&A as well. Also to note, I'll be sharing some interesting bits in the chat throughout the session, so keep your eyes peeled for those. If you're on LinkedIn, check the comments, have a refresh of the comments, things like that. It's always useful so you can see what I'm sending right as I send it. Brilliant. That's everything from me, so I'll be back to repeat these messages for any new joiners shortly, but until then, enjoy the background music. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session. My name is Reese, and I'll be your moderator today. We're going to kick off the session in about a minute or two. We're just waiting so everyone has a chance to join. In the meanwhile, though, we'd love to hear from you, so let us know where you're joining from using the chat or the comments, depending on what platform you're watching on. And tell us something that you're excited to hear about in today's session. Obviously, I imagine everyone will have been aware of what OpenAI came out with last week. So if there's any particular thing that you got excited about, let us know what that is in the chat. A few bits of housekeeping before we kick off. The session is being recorded and the recording will be emailed to everyone that's registered for the event. You can do that at datacamp.com/webinars, and it'll be the first one that appears. And I'm also going to be sending a link in the chat very shortly so you can get registered, and we'll send you the recording as well as any extra links and resources as well. If you have any questions at any point throughout the session, then please let us know. They can be to do with the topics that we're discussing, but we're also open to other questions as well. We're going to have a Q&A at the end, but we're also going to have mini Q&As on our topics that we're going to run through today. So if anything springs to mind at any point, let us know in the chat and I will save them for the Q&A. If you have anything else that you're struggling with, if you're struggling with links or anything else like that, then let me know. I'm also going to be sending a few bits in the chat as well that will be related to what we're talking about today. Brilliant. I think that's everything from me. So now I'll hand you over to your host for this session, Richie. Richie, please take it away.
Welcome to the webinar. This is Richie. All right. So last week, OpenAI had a developer day conference, and they were talking about several new features, and we're going to cover the highlights of those today. So without further ado, let's dive in. Now, most of the images from this presentation are either screenshots from the OpenAI talk, or we've got a few generated by OpenAI's DALL-E model as well. But here's Sam Altman. He's the OpenAI CEO, and he was talking about some of the usage statistics for the OpenAI products. So this is GPT, but also the other products like Whisper for transcribing audio and DALL-E for generating images. Now, on the right-hand side, you can see they've got 100 million weekly active users. Now, that's a pretty incredible figure. be very pleased if we had 100 million people joining these data camp webinars every week. But one thing that's very useful to note is that these three categories that are shown on screen is how OpenAI thinks about its audience. So it has three separate audience groups or user groups. So we've got developers, businesses, and then general users. And that's how we're going to think about this today. All right, so the first big announcement was a new version of GPT that OpenAI are calling GPT-4 Turbo. So until now, there were two main versions of GPT being used. So there's GPT 3.5 Turbo, which is basically a faster version of the older GPT version 3.5. And then there's GPT-4, which is fancier and basically provides better quality output, but it's a bit slower and it's more expensive. Now, GPT-4 is essentially the equivalent of GPT 3.5. Sorry, GPT-4 Turbo is basically it's a faster version of GPT-4 in the same way that GPT 3.5 Turbo is a faster version of GPT 3.5. Beyond that, there are a few additional extra features. So GPT-4 Turbo does have a few benefits beyond GPT-4 as well. And the first of those is an improved knowledge cutoff. So I want to say current versions, the versions of GPT until now were all trained on data up until September 2021. And that means if you ask GPT to answer questions about events that have happened since September 2021, then it would either say, I don't know about this, or it would, what's called hallucinating, it would just make up an answer. So you'd get unreliable, inaccurate results for anything about that happened after September 2021. Now with GPT-4 Turbo, the cutoff date has moved forward, I think it's 19 months. So you've got an extra year and a half or so of data being trained on, and that means it's much better at talking about recent events. So when's this actually useful? Well, first of all, if you want to ask it questions about things that happened in late 2021 or 2022 or early 2023, you're going to get much better results. And generally, you might say, well, so what? That's a fairly short time period. But if you're doing things like asking about code, then that can be really useful. So there's been a certain irony that if you ask GPT to help you write code on generative AI, so for example, if you ask it questions about LangChain, it doesn't know about it because LangChain didn't exist back in September 2021. So for data science use cases, this is really, really important to have up-to-date knowledge about the latest versions of packages, the latest code that's being used. Similarly, if you're asking questions about product features, those tend to change on a pretty rapid basis. So if you're using business intelligence tools, so you're using Tableau, Power BI, any of the others, then it's going to have much more up-to-date knowledge about product features and how to do things. So we move fast in the world of data. So having this up-to-date knowledge is incredibly important. Now, this second feature of GPT-4 Turbo is a little bit more technical. So large language models have a thing called a context window, which is basically how long or how much of the conversation the model can store in its memory. Now, GPT-4 Turbo supports, as Sam's saying there, is 128,000 tokens worth of context. I'll get into what that means in a moment. The short answer is that, like the robot elephant on the left, it has a very long memory. And there are two main use cases for this. So firstly, it means that you can work with longer documents. Secondly, you can have longer conversations. Again, I'll get into some use cases of this in a moment. Now, 128,000 tokens is pretty meaningless, so let's convert that into human units. So large language models don't work directly with words. they have to convert words into tokens. And a token is usually, it's like one token is a word, but it can also be a piece of punctuation. And occasionally, like some types of words have to be broken down into a couple of tokens. So in practice, at least for English, you can do a rough conversion of about 4 tokens is 3 words. So 128,000 tokens, that's 96,000 words. Again, that's pretty hard to imagine. So let's convert it into pages. If you've got 400 words per page, that's about 240 pages of memory. So it can store, a small book worth of conversation at once. So this number is 4 times higher than the largest value that the original GPT-4 can support. So pretty big benefit there. And there are a few other large language models that also have like very long context windows. So Anthropic's Claude 2 model has 100,000 tokens of context. And there's some open source models that also have 128,000 tokens worth of context. So it's up there with the best, but it's not unique. And we are still like a few innovations away of being able to work with some sort of epic books. You think of like, what was the Proust book? In Search of Lost Time. That's like 4,000 pages long. We're a little bit far away from being able to deal with that in one go, but it's still a huge improvement. Now, there is a caveat to this, and that is that with long context windows, the accuracy of retrieving information from that context isn't great in the middle. So in general, large language models are only good at finding information from the past conversation or from any documents you've given to them if they're at the start or end of the conversation. So it's a little bit like human attention span. You remember stuff. You remember the first 5 minutes of the webinar and the last 5 minutes when we have Q&A. The stuff in the middle is a bit harder to remember. So if you look at this plot, there's a U-shaped curve here. Now, each of these lines on the plot represents a large language model. So GPT-4 isn't one of them, but GPT 3.5 is. But you see, every single model has this U shape, and the left-hand side represents accuracy, or the vertical axis, the y-axis is accuracy. The left-hand side is like the start of the context window. The right-hand side is the end of the context window. And so you can see it comes from a paper called Lost in the Middle. So accuracy decreases in the middle. If you are interested in reading some actually fairly readable AI research, there's a link to the archive paper at the bottom left. So whether or not it actually works, there is definitely a trend towards increased context windows. So I couldn't resist including this very old possible Bill Gates quote. I'm not sure whether he actually said it or not, but he said 640K ought to be enough for anybody. He was referring to RAM in computers, of course, but 640K context window does sound pretty useful. Maybe about the right amount. However, there is some early stage research from Microsoft aiming for like 1 billion tokens in the context. So I suspect this is going to be a little bit like megapixels on your digital camera. So a few years ago, this used to be something that was touted in whenever you bought a camera. It was like, oh, the camera's got however many megapixels. And now it's like, well, we have enough. No one really cares. There are more important features. And at the moment, context windows are something that are being touted very loudly by the makers of large language models. I suspect in a few years' time, we're going to say, okay, we have enough, and no one will care anymore. It'll just be sufficient. But yeah, 1 billion, maybe that's what we need to get to. Okay, so the two big use cases for this are if you're doing information extraction from a document. So one of the big use cases of GPT or other large language models is that you can pass in a whole document, and then you can ask GPT to do things like summarizing the document, so you can automatically create an executive summary. Or one even fancier thing you can do is to ask questions about the document. So this is brilliant when your colleagues say, okay, we've got a meeting tomorrow, please can you read this 50-page document beforehand? What you can do, you pass the document into GPT, and then you just ask it about the bits you need. You don't need to read the whole thing. Of course, be careful and make sure you're not sharing confidential information there. But in principle, asking questions of documents is an incredibly important sort of business use case of GPT. And this lets you work with longer documents, because before it's like, well, okay, you can put a couple of pages in there, but that's not really that useful for summarizing. What you really care about is summarizing the book length stuff that you can't be bothered to read. So this is much more useful. The second thing is being able to have longer conversations. So quite often you can get useful responses from ChatGPT in just a couple of responses. You know, a couple of back and forth, you ask it a question, it gives you a response. For chatbots, you often have to have a much longer conversation. If you're trying to get to the bottom of a support query, it can be a fairly substantial conversation. And so having that longer conversation without risking inconsistency is very useful. So actually, I should mention, once the length of the conversation exceeds the context window, ChatGPT or GPT cannot remember the start of the conversation, and it may start to contradict itself after that because it's just losing facts. And so having that longer context window is going to help prevent that. All right, so this next feature is a lot less technical. It's pretty simple. GPT-4 Turbo is cheaper than GPT-4. So how much cheaper, you might ask? Well, okay, so this time we're talking about programmatic access to GPT, so using the OpenAI API. So we're not talking about the ChatGPT web app. This is about calling GPT from other bits of software. And so your prompts are now 1/3 of the old price, and the responses are now half of the old price. So when you're using the API, you get charged for the amount of text you pass in and the amount of text you receive back. So we're looking at prices in US cents per 1,000 tokens. And with GPT-4, it was 3 cents for an input. GPT-4 Turbo now 1 cent. And for the responses, used to be 6 cents, now 3 cents. So as a pretty strong incentive, if you are using GPT-4 already, you're going to want to switch over to GPT-4 Turbo as soon as possible. All right, and one of the thing, there's sort of many eyes on the photo there, but one of the big trends for next year, I think, is going to be what's called multimodal AI. So in 2023, the big story really has been about generative, or been about generating text. So GPT rules the roost, and you're all these other large language models. But something that wasn't true at the start of 2023, but now is that you can also generate images that are pretty decent. I mean, I'm using it here in this presentation, using DALL-E 3 to create images. It works pretty well. And so there's a variation of GPT-4 Turbo called GPT-4 Turbo with Vision. And I'm going to explain what that is. So TTS on the right, that's text to speech. That means voice generation. I feel like that's a pretty minor thing at the moment, so I'm not really going to get into that, but I will get into what the vision stuff is. So there are basically 3 things you can do with GPT-4 Turbo with Vision. And the idea is that you upload an image and then you create some text from it. And I think every web developer, or basically, will know that you have to provide what's called alternative text for any image. So for people who are have vision problems. So people who are using a screen reader, what will happen is whenever you get to an image in a web page, the screen reader will read out this alternative text description of what the image is, and that's going to help them understand what's going on in the web page. Now, every single web developer I know hates writing these things because it's kind of tedious and also sometimes quite difficult to go through every single image and then write a description of what is in that image. And GPT-4 Turbo with Vision can do this automatically. So for this example photo on the left, it will probably come up with some text like a robot with many eyes reads a menu. A related idea is that you might want to write a caption for the image. And this is basically the same thing, but it's a little bit more abstract. And because GPT-4 Turbo can do quite creative writing, it's actually pretty good at this as well. So in this case, it might say, well, image to text functionality has come to GPT-4 because that's what we're advertising. It doesn't want to be as literal as the text description. Oops, sorry. And thirdly, you can also extract text from an image. So in this case, the robot is conveniently reading the wrong menu, so we can see that there is some text in the image. And GPT-4 Turbo with Vision can extract that text and then give you it as a literal text response. So it's essentially a text extraction feature. If you've got an image you actually want, in this case, you'd want to read the contents of the menu and have that as text to work with. All right, so I'm going to take a short pause here for questions before we go on to the next one. Reese, do we have any questions?
Yep. So we've got a couple so far. So there are actually two from the same person, Bernstein's. So they ask, when I'm on ChatGPT, it just mentions GPT-4. Is GPT-4 Turbo restricted to the API? So yeah, when are people going to get to use GPT-4 Turbo?
Yes. So it's being rolled out as we speak. I'm not sure what the exact launch time is. Actually, I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to share my ChatGPT instance instead. Just let me reshare. Share this window. Okay, so this is my version of ChatGPT. And you can see they've changed the menus a little bit. So you've got a choice of GPT-4, GPT 3.5. They don't have Turbo in the name. I think this is ChatGPT 4 Turbo. It's really not clear anymore, but it does have all the features that were mentioned last week. So I think it's already available for me. I don't know how widespread the rollout is for people. So I've just got the standard. Well, it's the ChatGPT Plus plan, so it's the paid version, but it's the version for individuals.
And
so,
would it be likely that you'd have to tick on the beta features toggle as well in the settings menu?
Yeah. So if you go to setting, click on my name, settings and beta, and then beta features. It's not obvious here. So I've got access to plugins, advanced data analysis. Yeah, there's no toggle for it.
Best have them on anyway.
Yeah, I think because ChatGPT 4 Turbo is cheaper, that means it's cheaper for OpenAI to run than the original GPT-4. So they're going to roll it out to everyone as soon as they can.
Right. Second question we've got is from Bernstein's again. So they ask, I've noticed that the chat will lose context. How do you know when the context window is closed for the chat? Is there any?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is you just start getting stupid responses that contradict what was going on before. I mean, you might not notice immediately. I mean, I don't think there's any sort of in ChatGPT notification of this, but yeah, you will start noticing it if you get silly responses.
Okay, brilliant. Cool. We've got a few more questions now. So one from Alex here, which is, I have a GPT-4 paid version, however, I can't find GPT-4 Turbo on the OpenAI website. again, yeah, we've kind of covered this, so we're not really sure whether it's rolled out to everyone to begin with, but yeah, you'll just
I think
start
it's just a
noticing.
disagreement at OpenAI between the product teams and the marketing teams on exactly what you're calling it. So yeah,
Very familiar.
it's the same stuff.
Brilliant. I think that's it for questions now. But yeah, for everyone else, make sure you keep your questions coming in the chat, and I'll be saving them for the next Q&A that we do shortly.
All right, back to the slides. Okay, so the next thing is that you can have you can use and make custom versions of GPT, and they're calling OpenAI calling this GPTs, which at first I thought was really cute as a name, but then I started trying to write about it, and now I've decided I don't understand English grammar at all when your product name is plural. Like, is it? I don't know. GPTs is a great feature. GPTs are a great feature. I don't know. Anyway, the name annoyed me enough that I made some silly homonym images for you. So you've got a GP being teased and some GPTs. Anyway, the point is there are now lots of different versions of GPT, and you can make your own. And Sam Alton described 3 different benefits of this. So there are 3 things you need to know about these custom GPTs. So first of all, instructions. Now, ChatGPT or the standard GPT can answer almost any question you give it. It can talk in almost any style, and usually this is a really good idea. However, sometimes you want more limited conversation. So particularly in a corporate setting, if you are creating a chatbot to help your users work with a product, you only want it to talk about the product. You don't want it to talk about anything else. Like, you don't want it to start discussing its favorite anime movies. You really just want it to stay focused on the product. Secondly, you're probably only going to want it to talk in a professional, helpful voice. So you want to limit the tone of voice so it's not just going to say mean things to your customers. And so one thing that these custom GPTs allow you to do is to provide instructions to say, to choose the topic that you want your personal GPT to talk about and the style that it responds in. So as an example, you're going to create a fitness instructor GPT. So in this case, you'd say you're going to give it a role to play. You can say, okay, you're a fitness instructor. You're going to tell it about the topics that you want your GPT to talk about. So you can say, okay, you love to provide fitness tips, give advice on fitness. So you're really restricting the topic of the conversation to just fitness. And secondly, you want to define the tone. So if you're a fitness instructor, it helps if you're trying to encourage people to do some sort of exercise and make people feel comfortable. And you don't want your GPT to start fat shaming people. So in this case, you might say, okay, provide encouragement, make people feel comfortable exercising. All right. So in this respect, I think that these personal GPTs, they are OpenAI is kind of moving in on the character.ai turf. So I don't know whether any of you used character.ai. Basically, it lets you create your own characters, have conversations with them, and I don't know, you can there's all sorts of things. So there's some stuff for learning. So you can speak to historical figures to practice your history books. There's lots of stuff like fitness instructors, people to give you advice on things. And then there's some stuff where actually it feels like a lot of their characters are just like random people to have romances with. So OpenAI has obviously gone, well, character.ai is doing quite well. Let's try and replicate what they're doing. Secondly, in order to make sure that your personal GPT has suitable context, rather than just having to type everything into the ChatGPT interface, you can also upload documents. And so in the example on the screen, so Sam's showing an example of creating a startup mentor. So this is a GPT for giving advice to founders of new startups. And what he did was he uploaded transcripts of some lectures about startups that he'd previously given. So it's got some existing text. This is going to provide context, more context on, again, tone of voice and topics, and also it can provide facts as well. So in this case, it's saving you doing a lot of typing. You can reuse content. One thing idly dreaming about is having taking some of the transcripts from my webinars, from the Data Frame podcast episodes, and then just having something to replace me. That'd be much easier if we can outsource myself to a robot. All right, so the point of this is that you can have as much context to give GPT sort of accurate results that are on topic with the intentions you provided in the early instructions. Now, it really wasn't clear from the OpenAI presentation how this works, so we can have a very brief technical digression. Now, if you want to provide a customized version of a large language model, there are two possible technologies available, and it's not totally clear which is being used. So let's cover fine-tuning first. Now, as you may know, a large language model is something called a neural network. So it's a type of deep learning. So it's a big neural network. And the idea behind fine-tuning is that you change the final layers in the neural network to behave differently, and then it gives you slightly different output. Now, this is particularly good for changing the tone of voice. So it's changing the style of the conversation. Earlier layers in the neural network, this is like learning what a word is, making the model know how grammar rules work. The later layers are all about the style of speech. Now, fine-tuning is incredibly, well, I don't say incredibly, but it's pretty expensive to do. The alternative is something called retrieval augmented generation. And that means you store pieces of text in a vector database, and then you use the magic of linear algebra to retrieve relevant text, relevant bits of text, and then you augment your prompt with these bits of text. And this is really great for improving factual accuracy. It's also very cheap to do. So the way they're making these custom GPTs, if it was any other company, I would have said, well, they're always just going to use retrieval augmented generation. However, OpenAI is a slightly weird company. First of all, they have a fine-tuning API, so you can do fine-tuning models via the OpenAI API. And secondly, because they have a partnership with Microsoft, they're doing enough computation that like Microsoft's having to rebuild as bits of Azure for them. So they essentially have infinite Azure credits and a lot of venture capital money, so they can probably afford to do fine-tuning. They might be using that, especially if they want to do changing tones of voice. So it's not quite clear how it works, but it's going to be one of these two things. All right. The other thing is that you can perform actions with these custom GPTs. So there's this idea of something called an AI agent, and that means that, say, rather than just writing the text of an email you want to send, it can also actually perform the action and send that email. So in this case, they had a nice demo. I can't remember the name of the speaker, but she was showing how to get some details from a calendar and then go off and send someone a text message based upon this. So it's got some really nice interactions with other pieces of software. So in this case, there's a Gmail calendar and then someone else's smartphone. There was something slightly suspicious about this demo though. So she did a demo on Zapier. Now, Zapier is software for, it's got a point and click interface for gluing other bits of software together, like, for example, calendars and text messages. So Zapier already has this functionality for working with these other tools. And I kind of realized that if Sam Altman had come to me and said, Richie, I need you to do a presentation on AI agents. These things are super hot right now, but we don't have any functionality here, and engineering are busy making GPT-4 Turbo. The kind of demo I would do would be to create a Zapier demo where I use something called the function calling feature of the API. I'm going to get to that in a moment, and then hook it up to Zapier, so Zapier has to do everything else. So it's not totally clear whether OpenAI have built something new here, or whether it's like a marketing thing for existing tools that have been glued together. We'll have to sort of wait and see exactly what is possible. Anyway, it is going to be very cool. I'm hoping that AI agents are going to become a real thing next year. I mean, this year there were a few AI agents that were sort of touted, but they kind of didn't work that well. Next year might be the year for AI agents. We shall have to wait and see. Okay, the next thing is that there's a GPT store coming. So once you've created your own custom GPT, you can make it public, publish it in the store, and then you will get royalties. Now, the language that was used here was a bit fuzzy. So Sam Altman was saying that for the most popular custom GPTs, they will get a revenue share, so some sort of royalty for this. It's not clear how much money you'll get. It's not clear how popular it has to be before you get any money. And it's not clear if there are going to be any other limitations. So I don't know whether this is like you can have a full-time job creating GPTs, or whether it's just going to be a nice side hustle, a little bit of pocket money. You'll have to wait and see. But if you are looking to make a bit of cash from your AI skills, then I would suggest get started playing around with these sooner rather than later. Make yourself known in the GPT store before other people do. Probably best get on it pretty quick. All right. And then I had a guest on a recent webinar. So last month, Lucas Wall came to talk to us about personal digital assistants and personal versions of GPT, things like that. So he's got a business which is called Alma.ai, which is essentially the same thing as the GPT store. And so I reached out to him last week and I was like, did OpenAI just sort of stump on your business? They're sort of competing. And he made a very nice YouTube video for me, just a little response. So I'm just going to play that for you now. Reese, let me know if people can hear this.
Hello, Richie and friends, Data Camp. Lucas here, founder of Alma.ai.
Yep,
Regarding OpenAI's announcement earlier this week of their store, their AI store, we at Alma celebrated. We are the first AI marketplace, so we welcome the decision because making AI accessible to all resonates deeply with our beliefs. Long before OpenAI introduced ChatGPT, I was an advocate for disseminating AI in books, talks, everywhere I said it. So welcome OpenAI to the noble and true mission of democratizing AI. And for all of you amazing people who think this way, please let's connect to move AI forward. Again, thank you, Richie and DataCamp, for giving me the space.
I thought he's been quite magnanimous there. So definitely some competition, but Lucas really points out that, this is going to be a big thing. Just having one version of ChatGPT is fine. Everyone having their own versions of these things is going to be it's the future, really. I mean, I think there's scope for lots of people having lots of different versions of these AI assistants, like for particular tasks. Having narrow, well-defined chatbots is particularly important, rather than just having one sort of a general thing. All right. So before I move on to the Assistants API, let's take another short break for questions. Reese, do we have any more questions from the audience?
Yep. So we've got this one from Ren, so will ChatGPT ever be updated with real-time or near real-time information?
So I think what's likely to happen is that it's going to be updated more frequently than just waiting 18 months. Like it could be every 6 months, it could be every quarter. It's not quite clear what the cadence is going to be, but it's likely to be less time than has been left before. In terms of real-time stuff, what's a better option rather than OpenAI trying to rebuild GPT like every day is that you're going to have you pull in information from other sources. So there are two options for this. So first of all, the Bing search is now built into ChatGPT, so it can pull in information from the internet and acts more like an AI agent then, because it's then going to the internet and saying, well, let's run a query to see what information is returned, pulling it back in. Secondly, using the technique I mentioned earlier called retrieval augmented generation. So if you have up-to-date facts that you need to include, you put those facts in a vector database, and then you pull them into your query and then say, okay, here's the information you need. So I think it's going to be a case of retrieve information from other sources.
Got it. Another question we've got from Gohan. So can we ask how many tokens we've consumed in a conversation in order to find out whether our context limit is reached? Am I right in saying you can find the tokens you used if you're leveraging the API, but not necessarily from ChatGPT?
Yeah. So when you're using the API, so we've taught this in a few places. So you have there's a package called tick token, which is used to break your words into tokens, and that will also give you the token count. So if you're using the API, you can be quite strict in terms of how much how much you're consuming. In terms of managing like where you're up to relative to the context window, at the moment the onus is on the developer to handle that. But I'm going to talk about something in a moment that's going to change some of these things. In ChatGPT, I don't think it tells you when the context window has been reached, and you probably don't want to care about tokens once you're in ChatGPT.
Yeah, I think that'd probably confuse me if I saw it and didn't know what it was. So we got another one from Bernstein. So would it be possible to create a GPT completely knowledgeable on a specific tool? So Power BI in this case. Would we be able to scrape documentation, pass it as a custom GPT, and have it as a Power BI wizard, essentially?
That is a brilliant idea. I think you should build it. So yes, it will work. You should do it.
Cool. So we've got another one from Yulia here. So providing context and instructions is not a new feature on OpenAI. How is the custom GPT really different this time? And what's the pricing model to create the custom GPT?
Okay, so two questions. So the first one is about like, how is this new? Well, it's mostly again about user interface. So before, it's a total pain to have to keep pasting in your context, to do all that prompt engineering. In this case, you do the prompt engineering once, and it's saved for that GPT. In terms of the pricing model, it is included in ChatGPT Plus and ChatGPT Enterprise.
Cool. We've had a similar question from Alex, so I'll skip over that one. We've got another one from Supriya. So how safe is it to give Zapier access to your data and create these AI agents? So yeah, where should we be worried about data leakage and safety?
Yeah, so the good thing about a lot of these privacy issues when it comes to using ChatGPT is that most businesses have kind of solved these already. It's like if you can treat it in most cases the same as you would treat other web applications. So if data is too sensitive to store in something that's like a SaaS platform, so anything that's like not your own company's servers, then you don't want to use ChatGPT here. If it's safe enough to pass to Zapier, then you might be okay with this. again, I would really think very carefully about what's the value of this data, what are the consequences of this data being leaked somewhere. Yeah. Speak to your legal department.
Cool. And we've got one more from Yukon. So, how should we tune a GPT model?
So I'm glad you asked, actually. So on Friday, we've got we've got a code along session on fine tuning. We're not doing it with GPT. I think we're doing it with Llama 2. There is one on fine tuning GPT coming in December. But yeah, this is something we're going to address in code along. So please do come back. I'll give you more details at the end if you need the links.
Cool. And I think that's it for questions, but I did just want to highlight another comment that we had from someone on YouTube saying Microsoft is already building a Copilot for Power BI. So going back to creating the Power BI wizard. Yeah, this is all something you can already get help with inside of Power BI, but yeah, creating something that is the pure knowledge base for it is potentially a different thing. So yeah. So yeah, for anyone that didn't know, it's already in Power BI. That's already sorry, it's not already in Power BI, but it's coming.
Yeah. Still, I would say build your own. It'll be fun. All right. Let me share my screen again, and we will go back to part 3, the Assistance API. All right. So for those who don't know, there is what's called the OpenAI API for interacting with all the different OpenAI models, so GPT, DALL-E, Whisper, all the rest. And this has now been extended to cover assistants, so that basically means chatbots and AI agents. And there were 4 different features that were touted during this presentation, so I'm going to go through those in turn. All right, so the first thing is threads. So this is for conversation management. Now, until now, if you were using the API, basically it couldn't remember any of the previous prompts or any of the responses it had given you. It was something called a stateless API. And so all the conversation management had to be done by the developer. With the Assistance API, this is handled for you. So this is from a workspace I created that's going to be available to you shortly. And teaching people how to hold a conversation with GPT is like, well, yeah, you actually have to kind of manage this yourself. I don't know whether this is going to completely replace conversation management for people who are developing applications with AI. You might want to do some of it yourself if the conversation structure gets complicated. I don't know how sophisticated the Assistance API is going to be, but there's sort of a trend towards you having to do less and being able to develop things quicker and having the API handle more stuff for you. So the upshot of this is it's going to be easier to create conversations or long conversations with the AI. The other thing is that one of the consequences of the API being stateless is that by the time you get having a long conversation, every time you send a new message to the API, so every time you send a new prompt, you have to also pass in all of the previous conversation that needs to be remembered. That means you're passing a lot of text backwards and forwards, and that slows things down. So this stateful management of conversations, this threads feature, that means that your AI applications are going to run much faster for long conversations. And so again, chatbots are the big winner here. Once you start getting into those really, really long conversations, this is going to be much faster. Now, the second feature mentioned was retrieval, and it basically means you can store additional text. The thread system is obviously based on being able to retrieve text from earlier conversations. There were really no details provided here. It's not clear whether you can store text that isn't part of the conversation or not. or whether it's just like this is how Threads works. No technical details are provided. It's probably a built-in vector database. I don't know whether OpenAI have decided to. I mean, they've already been fighting several companies, I think, here, but I don't know whether they're sort of stepping on the toes of like Pinecone and Milvus and Chroma and Weaviate and all the rest of those companies that are doing vector databases. It's not clear what's happening there. But basically, this is another tool that's going to help you create AI-based products. Next thing is that ChatGPT's got this built-in advanced data analysis tool that can let you run Python code. So rather than just being able to say, okay, generate this Python code, and then you have to go and copy and paste it into your Python IDE, it can actually run it. And this is now going to be available via the Assistance API. So that means you can actually get it to run Python code via the API. So this is pretty cool. I did a webinar on using the advanced data analysis tool recently. You see there's my face down bottom right. Please do check that out if you are interested. Let me just grab a short drink. All right, and the last feature from the Assistance API that was mentioned is improved function calling. So this function calling feature means you can tell GPT to return function calls in the form of JSON. So JSON is the format for JavaScript variables. And basically, it means you can provide a natural language interface to other software. So you type in questions using English or whichever language you prefer, and then it will convert that into a function call that can then be used to call other code. So this has already existed for a while, but there are two new improvements. So you saw the example I mentioned earlier was calling Zapier by using a natural language interface. And then there was another demo given where they were building a fake travel application and was asking some natural language questions, and it was doing things to update a map. Now, two benefits that were announced. There's a JSON mode, which basically means it more reliably returns valid JSON. So up until now, it was like function calling was a cool idea, but it didn't always work. And so you had to do lots of error checking within your software, and that's made things a pain to develop. So now that works much more reliably. Secondly, you can get it to return multiple function calls from one prompt. So if you say, I don't know, with this travel app, it's like, okay, find me a hotel in Paris and make a booking. It's going to call the, it's going to have to do several tasks at once. And that basically means you're not going to have to you do lots of back and forwards trying to split this up into individual tasks in order to create functions. So all this means much easier to develop AI applications again. Now, that was rather a lot to digest. So we've got a lot of different features. I'm just going to summarize what are the implications for the three groups. So all these announcements put together basically mean making chatbots, just for developers, so making chatbots and AI agents, it's going to get a lot easier. And I think this trend's only going to continue over the next few years. Secondly, if you're wondering, like, well, what should I be building? Natural language interfaces to your software is a really good thing to consider doing. Now, for general users, I would say we're going beyond just working with text. You now need to start thinking about, well, how can I work with images using GPT, and how can I start working with audio? So things like transcribing meetings, explaining what's going on with images, and also creating images. These are now much easier to do. And secondly, because that increased context window, working with long documents, that's now possible without being horrendously faffy. And so you can start thinking about, well, once I got the book length report, how can I use it with AI? I think for businesses, the use cases are pretty much the same as for individuals, but now also you're going to want to think about, well, what custom versions of GPT might I want within my business? And finally, I would say, because this is becoming so widespread, these tools are really at the point where anyone can use them, but using them well and safely. Like just thinking about, well, what are the security or privacy implications of this is important. I think everyone within your business just need to have some level of AI literacy. So please do make sure that if you've got any colleagues who you think, well, I wouldn't really trust them to use ChatGPT, maybe they need a bit of training. Now, there is a bit of homework for you. So for the individual users, I would say we have a skill track available called AI Fundamentals. This is a series of I think 6 courses. It's going to take you through all you need to know to get started using things like ChatGPT and just getting started on, what does this actually mean? If you want to learn about things in a business context, we got a variant called AI Business Fundamentals. So this goes into a little bit more detail about how you can use AI in business and worrying about things like privacy and security. And then if you're actually interested in developing with AI, we have a series of code alongs built into DataCamp Workspace. This is coming very soon, so expect an announcement on this launch in the next few days. All right, and with that, this is my best effort at getting DALL-E to draw me. Not 100% accurate, but I'll take it. So please do ask me anything.
Brilliant. So we've got 2 questions to begin with. One is one that I can answer straight away. So this one comes in from Danielle. Will you share the presentation? Amazing webinar. I have just shared the link so you can get the slides in the chat. And if not, you can scan the QR code on screen now. You can have those. The next one that we've got is from Supriya again. So when will custom GPT be open to the public? So yeah.
It's already available. Actually, let me. I'll spend. I'm not going to build one of these things, but I'll spend 5 seconds showing you where it is. So if you go to your name at the bottom left, My GPTs, then you've got all the sort of ones made by OpenAI. So some example ones to play with. Create a GPT, super easy. Write in your description, add some files with existing text, and then you can start working with it. You can literally build one of these in 5 minutes. Like, it's going to take a bit longer to build a good one, but just if you want to play around with it, you can get started, and some configuration details, you give it a name, description, all that sort of stuff.
Brilliant. I think that's it for, actually, no, we just had one come in from Alex. So Alex said he's still concerned about the data privacy layer. Is there any more advice that we can give on this topic?
Okay. So I would say for now, don't put anything that is commercially sensitive in there. Don't put anything that's going to violate any sort of any personal information. So there's data privacy laws around the world. You want to make sure that, like, if something is going to assume you're going to break those laws if you're going to put personally identifiable information in those. One thing you can do is use synthetic data. So we had a really great webinar back in September about using mostly AI for generating synthetic data that has the same properties as your existing data set, but it's fake. That's a really great way of generating stuff that looks a bit like what you want to go into GPT. And often, like, if you're just having a conversation with ChatGPT, just use fake names, a few fake details here, and that's probably enough for most of the conversations you're going to be having. But yeah, synthetic data is probably your best solution here.
Cool. Another question we've got is from Isabella, and it's essentially saying, for anyone interested in this space and trying to keep up with it, where's the best place to go to keep up with what's the latest news and latest updates in the AI space?
Yeah, so keep coming back to these webinars. Do check out the DataCamp blog as well. So datacamp.com/webinars, datacamp.com/blog. We do try and keep you up to date with all the things that are relevant, particularly if you're a data professional or you're interested in the data side of things, then that's our big focus. But yeah, more generally, it's kind of everywhere, and I get that it's overwhelming, but yeah, just show up to a few things, and I guess if anyone in the audience wants to share their ideas for where they find interesting stuff in the chat, then please do so. Before we wrap up, I just want to say 2 more webinars this week. So tomorrow, we've got a session on revolutionizing decision-making using AI. So we've got a senior director and head of data and analytics from Unilever, so a pretty big name coming tomorrow. And then on Friday, we've got a session on fine-tuning your own Llama 2 model. So there was a question asked earlier about how do you go about like fine-tuning these models yourself. If you want to do this using open source large language models, we've got Maxime Lebon from JP Chase coming along. He's really good, and that's going to be a pretty fun session. So please do come back again later this week. And then, oh man, there's just like, I think we've got three webinars next week as well. Just go to datacamp.com/webinars. I want to see you all again soon. There's so much exciting stuff to talk about. So yeah, thanks to Reese for moderating. Thank you for everyone who asked a question. Thank you to everyone who showed up today. I want to see you all back again soon. All right, bye.